And we are live from the East Coast to Hawaii. Welcome everyone to Firmidable's webcast, Turning Prospects into Clients, Effective Ways to Maximize Your Marketing Dollars, featuring our guest presenter, attorney and consultant, the renowned Jim Brown. I'm Nathan Chapman, president at Firmidable. Before we get started, let's do a little housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded, so you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to that recording. You'll also receive a webinar survey. We ask you to take a moment to complete it so we can bring you the quality legal marketing educational programs that you want to hear. On this next slide, we've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You can submit text questions and comments throughout the presentation by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation, but we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. With that, I'd like to take a minute to introduce James Mitchell Brown. I've personally been working in legal marketing for over 25 years, and I think I've known Jim pretty much from the start. I once heard Jim say that he could make a nice living on all the leads and missed opportunities that most law firms let fall through the cracks of their intake process. And I believe him. I've seen Jim turn situations around at a number of law firms. My agency, Firmidable, has invested heavily over the years to develop what we believe is the nation's most effective legal marketing. But the one part where we have no control is what happens once that lead goes to your intake team. In fact, an identical marketing program can appear to soar or to crash on the rocks, depending on that team. So that's why today's program is so important. Jim Brown founded Attorney Consultant, Inc. in 2003. He's now known as the nation's leading consultant for small and medium-sized law firms. Jim helps firms improve their intake process, case management, hearing and trial preparation, and he's often brought in when attorneys are buying or selling practices. Jim has testified before congressional committees numerous times and was a featured attorney on a CBS special with Bill Moyer about people falling through the Reagan safety nets. One of Jim's clients, who's brought him to their offices twice a year for 10 years, says Jim never runs out of new ideas to improve their practice. So with that, we look forward to hearing some new ideas today. Jim, it's all yours.
Thank you, Nathan. Hello, everybody. The intake that is done in your office can sometimes be the difference between winning and losing the case. It can be the difference between getting that little bit of extra information necessary to prevail or making the client comfortable enough with your firm to be a successful partner at every step of the claim processing. A poor intake not only costs you clients who will not be signed up, it costs you wins for some of the clients you do sign up. The difference between being average and excellent is your creativity. Don't reject every client that doesn't fill every blank on your form. If you do, you'll miss out on a lot of great cases. If you assume that the people you have taught to do your intakes don't need constant reinforcement of your standards, you will miss out on a lot of good cases. If you think associates and support staff will never turn away a case that you would take, you're going to miss out on a lot of claims that your office should be handling. Call some of the clients that are being turned away. You'll be surprised to see that cases that you want are being rejected. You'll be surprised to see that your standards aren't always being followed. Check some of those rejections yourself and make sure the standards that you've established for your firm are being followed. What can you expect in terms of happiness out of your practice? First of all, you should expect to have lots of clients, and those clients should create good fees for you. But how do you do that? First of all, you have to improve and decide on your actions. What do you want to do? You have to race against change. The best firms in your market are constantly changing, and they're constantly improving. Are you doing that? Are you looking at yourself? The things that make you successful are the same things that keep you from being successful if you're not looking at yourself constantly and saying, how can we get better? But the best way to face change is to admit you can improve. You have to say, we're not always doing things the best way they can, and we can improve them. Our intake can always get better. If there are clients that have good cases that are going elsewhere, we should be doing something better. Include your staff on how you can do it. The people doing your intakes, the people answering your phones, managing your cases, talking to your clients every day, know the weaknesses in your firm better than you do. And they can give you good ideas on keeping your clients happy, on how you project your firm's image to the community, and how you can get more clients. Decide how you are unique. What makes you unique compared to your competitors, and how do you project that to people when you answer the phone? Be available for prospects early in the morning, late at night. When else? When else do they want to talk to you, to see you, to sign up to be your clients? Look for new opportunities to show who you are and what you can offer to the prospective clients. There are a lot of firms in the same market you're in who can win the cases for your clients, who can settle the cases, who can handle their cases as well as you can. But can they offer service as well as you can? What can you do that should make people want to hire you as their lawyers? You have to start by remembering what people dislike most about lawyers. And it doesn't matter if they have a Social Security case, a workers' comp case, an auto accident, whether they need a lawyer for a real estate, a contract, estate planning, or any other area of law. People in general dislike lawyers for one major thing. It's not that they don't return phone calls. It's not what the fees are. It's the fact that they have to hire one. Life has become so complicated that people resent that they need an attorney for everything. You can break down that barrier in the first 30 seconds of the phone call. The person talking to that client should tell them, it's a shame you have to hire an attorney, but that's why this firm was created. We created this firm to help you with the problem you called us about. When you see that new client, when you talk to them, start with a blank canvas. Why are they here? Who are they? And what can I do to help them? And during that first call, find out about them as a human being, not about their whiplash, their depression, their heart problems, but about who they are, what they are. Make them a human being to you and to your office, and they're more likely to sign up. They're more likely to be happy with you. They're more likely to keep their appointment after they're treated properly on the phone. They're more likely to send their intake package back if you do it all on the phone. Treat them like they're a real person. That blank canvas should paint a picture of the person you're talking to. Add empathy. One of my clients has empathy training twice a year for their entire staff, and it doesn't take much. Use the person's name 3 times on every phone call. It's simple. Hello, Mr. Smith. This is Mary Jane speaking. Well, Mr. Smith, I'll be glad to forward that information to Jim so he'll know what you called about. Thank you for calling, Mr. Smith. 3 times in a phone call, and that client is in a file on the shelf. On that intake, use their name at least 3 times. Mr. Smith, I'm glad you called. We'll be able to help you. Mr. Smith, I feel terrible for what happened to you, but this firm is the one that can help you. Add empathy. Is it hard for you to get out of bed in the morning the way you feel? Be empathetic, and they're going to be yours. How does your receptionist treat people who come into the office? I was having lunch with a friend. I got to the office, and the receptionist was on her cell phone. She didn't look up. She looked at her computer. She looked down at the computer again. She peeked at me, went back to her cell phone. I was there 6.5 minutes while I was being ignored. And then I said to her, I'm the expert witness on Mr. So-and-so's claim, and I charge $1,000 an hour. You've now cost him over $200 while I'm waiting here. When are you going to tell him I'm here? That got her attention. Your receptionist should greet people by name. If there's only one person coming in at 10 o'clock, instead of asking their name, say, hello, are you Mr. Johnson? I'll be glad to tell Mr. So-and-so you're here to see him. Be pleasant, be nice. I tell my clients to change the name of their receptionist from receptionist to director of first and last impressions. A great receptionist becomes even better with the title director of first and last impressions. Get them business cards, get them a plaque with their name and title, and you'll be amazed at how much better they do their job. You have 30 seconds to make a good impression on a client. 30 seconds. So you say, sorry you're having this problem. That's why we created this firm. We want to help you. It's empathy, it's kindness, it's the way you want to be treated, and it gets you results. So go for it. When there's a new prospect, whether they're on the phone or online, treat them with respect. Your clients aren't dumb. They may not be educated, but they're not dumb. So treat them properly. Speed counts. If a prospective client calls and wants an appointment, get them in fast. If you tell them we can't see you for 2 weeks, they will be going to another lawyer. My clients who don't have time for 2 or more weeks have a third of their prospects not keep their appointments. That's because they found another lawyer who will see them faster. My clients who take the name of prospects on the phone and then schedule appointments a day, 2 days, 3 days later to do the telephone interview, find they can't reach 25 or 30% of those prospects. Either they have the wrong phone number, or the phone's not answered, or the people don't want to talk to them. When people call, they want to hire you now. If they want to come in, if they call at 2 o'clock, say, do you want to come in now? There's not going to be a lawyer in the office and they want to see a lawyer, you just say, I'm sorry, the lawyers haven't gotten back from court, but we'll get everything taken care of. If you got, does a computer answer your telephone? I have found, and if you can measure the hang-ups, a lot of phone systems can, that if a computer answers your phone, you will have a lot of hang-ups. Because people don't like press 1 if you're a new client, press 2 if you want this, press 3 if you want that. They don't like it. It doesn't work. Never assume. Tell employees on the first day that they must always speak nicely to clients. When I go to an office to consult, we often will call 6 to 10 of a firm's clients. Some of them are people who have been clients for a month or 2. Some of them are people whose cases are closed already. In one firm, every single person said they didn't like how the receptionist spoke to them. When I spoke to the receptionist, she said, if I have to speak nicely to clients, I don't want to work here. We told the boss that. He asked her. She confirmed it. And that was the last day she worked at that firm. You have to make sure your staff knows that they speak nicely to the clients. Phones have to be answered within 3 rings. That means that your staff has to back up the receptionist. Whether you do it on a rotating basis, whether you have people who are scheduled to back it up, set up a system for a backup. And then you have that 3 seconds to make the first impression. Do it properly. That's part of intake, but it's part of marketing. When you say hello, if the prospect calls your firm, the person has to answer with a smile on their voice. Decide what your receptionist's responsibilities are. If you have a good director of first and last impressions who answers the phones perfectly, greets people who comes in nicely, triages the calls so they're distributed to the proper person, you have a great employee. Don't overload them with making and receiving and sending faxes, with opening the mail. If you give somebody too much to do, they end up not doing anything very well. Decide what the receptionist does, and then make sure they do it well. If you have somebody in your office who's calling internet leads, they have to keep that smile in their voice, identify who they are and where they're calling from. They have to say, we're calling because we got an internet lead. You were online and said you were interested in a lawyer about this area of law. Be empathetic. The person's coming to the office for the first time. Keep the smile. Get off the phone and greet them by name if they're expected. Be kind and caring. Some internet leads didn't know they were contacting a lawyer. They thought they were getting someone to give them information about a certain area of law. Some of them don't want to hire a lawyer. But if the person calling them treats them properly, emphasizes the urgency of their problem, treats them with respect, by the end of that call, they're ready to sign up. Make sure your person doing those calls do it properly, respectfully, kindly, and empathetically, and you'll get that client. If they're calling at the request of a referring source, Attorney Jones says, please call Mrs. Smith. She needs a lawyer. Tell them who told you to call, why. It works. I have a couple psychiatrists who ask me to call some of their patients who are expecting my call but don't have it within them to make the calls themselves. They're thrilled when I call. Be friendly, identify who you are, why you're calling, be empathetic. You have to identify the good cases. Do you delegate the intake? Do you delegate the rejection of new prospects? I have one client that has all of their acceptance rejection done by an answering service in the Philippines. And if anybody answers one question on the sheet wrong, they're rejected. No attorney oversight at all. You have to make it very clear to your intake department what you'll accept and what you'll reject. And you have to monitor it, whether you do it with ghost callers, whether you do it yourself by calling some of the people who were rejected to see if it was proper. You have to do it yourself. I was in a firm that spent over $6 million a year on television advertising for auto accidents. And in the 2 hours that I spent in the intake department, just talking to people that were rejected, they got over $120,000 on fees I took that were going to be rejected. Your intake department has to know what you expect of them. 30 to 40% of the cases that should be accepted are rejected by most firms. The average of good case being passed on by the intake departments is shocking. It's because of poor screening, poor teaching, poor reinforcing. Or, in some cases, the intake department changes the rules of what they will take. I was in one firm where, when I asked what you won't take, the intake department told me, we don't take anybody who's been convicted of a crime. And I said, what if you have somebody who got out of jail 17 years ago, graduated from college, worked in an office, in an executive position since then, and had a stroke, is paralyzed on one side and needs a lawyer. And they said, we wouldn't take him. He was in jail. The owner of the firm was shocked when he heard that. He knew nothing about it. Nobody told them they did this. You have to be finding these things out yourself. Intake departments don't always follow the rules of the owner of the firm in deciding what to take and in following those rules on a consistent basis. So pay attention. Intake needs a theory.
Jim, hey, Jim, it's Nathan. Hey,
Yes.
Somebody had a question that seems like we ought to touch on before we move on. They wanted to know, how do I make sure my team is not missing the good cases?
There are a few steps for that. One is, I recommend having a meeting of your intake people at least every 3 months. And with that, reinforce what you want. If you're going to call some of the people that are rejected, and you've actually taken some of those as clients, use that as examples. Don't be upset with any individuals about what they've rejected, but use those as teaching examples of cases that were rejected that should have been accepted. Next thing is, teach your intake people about the whole legal process of the cases you handle. Let them know how cases are worked up from start to finish, how cases are actually handled and litigated, so that whether it's Social Security or work comp or personal injury, let them know what it takes to win a case. That gets into the theory that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But if they understand that you need certain elements of a case to make it a good one, and you've taught them the legal principles, they will be better in actually doing their intake. If they know in a auto accident case that a person says, I had a heart attack 6 months after the accident, and I'm sure my accident caused it, they can ask a few questions, have a pretty good idea of whether it may or may not have, but also know whether the elements of that accident case make it worth taking or not. Usually, that's worth at least passing on to an attorney to decide. If it's a Social Security case and the person's had heart surgery and says, I have chest pains, they can say, how often do you get those chest pains? How long does it take for those chest pains to go away? And they sound intelligent asking that, because they've been taught that if you have chest pains and it takes more than 4 minutes to go away, that's a case that's a winner right there. So you make your intake people sound more intelligent, you teach them what it takes to win a case, and they do a better job identifying them right from the beginning. It's just a matter of educating your whole staff. Don't teach people just the job they do, teach them everything. Now, intake needs a theory, and that goes from start to finish on your whole case, because theories change as the case develops. But your intake department should be saying, what is wrong with this caller? They were hit from behind by a car. Do they have injuries? They're trying to get disability. Do they have severe impairments? They were hurt at work. They were in an industrial accident, rather. Were they hurt? What must we prove to win their case? How can we win it? What are the elements we need to win it? And intake needs to decide all of those. And in your case management software, make a field for theory and let your intake people fill that out. The theory is going to change as you get witness statements, as your evidence comes in. But if your intake people can't have a theory on how you can win, they can't take the case. I've had some clients that I've created a 2-tier intake. One of my clients, when I started with them, was bringing in 25 new clients a month. They're now bringing in 400 new clients a month. Level 1 of their intake answers the phones and fills in the blanks, and are basically word processors who are friendly as can be on the phones. And they get the person's name, address, Social Security number, telephone number, email, alternate contact. All of that goes directly into the computer in the case management software. They'll ask them their doctor's names and addresses and everything they need. It's just a word process data entry position by somebody who sounds like your best friend. It then goes to level 2, who's the skilled person. If you have somebody who's really good and really skilled, there's no reason for them to spend 20 to 30 minutes per call filling in the blanks. In this particular firm, for every 3 people doing the data entry on new clients, we have 1 person doing the skilled level intake. And that skilled person, in 5 to 10 minutes, decides whether or not to take the client. And if all that data is there, they can talk to that person and they can say, this is a good case, we can prove it. This isn't a good case, or this is that 1 out of 50 that we need a lawyer to get some input on. But 98% of the time, level 2 makes that decision. If they're taking the case, they kick it back to level 1 that either emails the forms to the client to sign and return, or mails them out to them, or, as you'll see later, sometimes has somebody bring the forms to them to sign and bring back. In any event, it happens smoothly, efficiently, and we have it down to a great science for this firm. When you're talking to a prospect, give them your undivided attention. Don't be interrupted. Whether they're in your office, whether they're on the phone, you can't be interrupted. If you, as the attorney, are talking to a prospective client, they resent the fact that you're interrupted unless it's a judge or a physician calling. But don't take phone calls from other clients, from your spouse, from your brothers or sisters. That client is important and deserves your undivided attention. The same thing from your intake department. You should be finding out what they're looking for. Some people are looking for something that's totally ridiculous. They have a soft tissue rear-end collision and think they should get $1 million. It's not necessarily up to the intake person to let them know they're not going to get that, but the intake person should be letting somebody else know that the person's expectations are unrealistic. Don't offer what you can't deliver. There are some people who, while they're talking about their claim that you can help them with, are talking about needing somebody to be in court with them next week because somebody painted the wrong side of their fence. You have to make sure they know you're not going to be doing that. Give them something at the end. Tell them what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. We're going to write the adjuster and tell them we're representing you. We're going to do this. We're going to file an appeal on your disability claim. We're going to notify your employer that we're representing you. Whatever it is, tell them at the end you're doing something. The last thing you do when somebody's leaving is you give them 2 brochures, 2 business cards. If you're mailing the packet to them, send a pen with your name on it. Nice to give them that. Some people don't have a pen to sign the forms with. It's good to give them that. If they're in your office and they're leaving, give them a magnet. The life of a refrigerator magnet is 7 years. It's a nice little gift. Make sure while you're talking to people that they understand what you're saying. Don't assume they do. People don't always understand, so every once in a while you're talking, ask if they have any questions. There are no dumb questions. They're getting overwhelmed with information on that first interview, so make sure they know what you're talking about. Be clear about your fee. People don't understand the fee, and especially in work comp and Social Security claims, so make it very clear. Do you track your intake people? Do you track them on the appointments that are scheduled that are kept? The packages that are returned within 7 days? I've been in some firms where the people who schedule the appointments, one person has 95% keep their appointments and another has 60%. One person has 95% of the packages returned within 7 days and somebody else has 60%. Packages returned with one follow-up. Do you ever look at how many cases are won by the intake person? One person has 95% of the cases they bring in won, and another person has 60% that you win. Sometimes the person who you win 95% of isn't bringing in enough cases, though. So don't just look at that number, but look at the results of the people that are doing your intake. Track it carefully and incentivize it. Incentivize it by the amount of clients they sign up. If one person's having more of their appointments kept than another, they should get a bonus for that. One person's having more packages returned than another, they should get a bonus for that. Don't overdo it. I had one client who was paying a bonus to his intake people for every new client they signed up from their television ads. And he was really amazed. He got his rate of signups down to $33 per new client. But he then found out that they signed up people who had no injuries. They signed up a couple people who had caused the accidents. They were signing up people where there was no insurance. So don't overdo it. On the follow-up, if you're mailing out packages, I recommend that people get... Yeah, Nathan.
Yes, we had another question before we move on.
Okay.
Somebody is asking, why should his law firm pay a bonus to employees simply for doing their job?
That's a good question. And if people are just doing their job and coming into work from 9 to 5, should they get a bonus for that? I like to make employees a partner with themselves. And if you see somebody who's doing a third better than somebody else or twice as well as somebody else, they deserve that bonus. If one person is getting 90% of their packages back within 7 days with no follow-up calls, it's expensive to have to keep making follow-up calls to clients to get their packages back. It's expensive to have to keep calling people who didn't keep their appointments or to find out they're not going to keep their appointment. They don't want you as their lawyer. If you have an employee who has a great record of having people keep appointments or send packages back, you're saving a lot of money. And if you give them $10 for every package that comes back within 7 days, or $10 for every appointment kept, you're way ahead. It costs you $10 for every follow-up call to see why they didn't keep their appointment, or every follow-up call to try and find out when they're sending the package back. Why not pay the person who's getting them back without those follow-up calls, who's getting the people in? You're going to be way ahead and you're going to have much happier employees. It just makes sense. When you're doing the follow-ups, I like to have a call made 5 days after you send it. Did you receive the package I sent you? Have you sent it back yet? If you haven't, do you have any questions about it? Another call 3 days later, so 8 days after it's sent. Oh, if they didn't get it in 5 days, you have to send a new package. Find out why. Another one 3 days later. Another one 4 days later. And another one 4 more days. I discussed paying the bonus for the returns. It just makes sense. You're saving yourself money. Check the rejections. We talked about that. Call them. Your intake and associates are rejecting good cases. There are electronic systems to do some of your follow-ups. And once you've put your client's email information and phone number information in, it can automatically call the client And if they pick up the phone, it signals the person in your office who will pick up the phone and talk to them immediately. It can send them emails for the follow-ups. It's amazing how it reduces your follow-up costs. It's worth looking into. It will do wonders for you on reducing costs and improving returns. Do you want more firefighters as clients? Never a bad thing. But I have clients. I told one of my clients about hiring a service to bring the forms to her clients to sign, wait for them to sign it, and return it. And she said, I don't have to do that. My husband's a firefighter. He works 24, is off 48. Firefighters are always looking for second jobs. And she hired some firefighters, divided them up in areas of the city, gave them the forms, and they brought them to the clients' houses to sign. Why do you use firefighters instead of police officers? It's because a police officer might see something in a house that they would have to arrest somebody for. A firefighter doesn't have that problem. Firefighters look presentable, will go into any neighborhood. You create an ID card on your computer and then laminate it. And you pay them per head for each house they go to. And they do a great job. You can find out where the union hall is for the firefighters in your area. And they are great. I have a client that has over 200 clients a month signed up by firefighters. They don't have to know anything about your area of law. They just have to know how to say, sign here. The one who has over 200 firefighters a month got each of his firefighters a tablet and a portable printer. He emails the forms to the firefighters. They pull them up on their tablet, print them on the portable printers, and then take them to the client's house, all filled out and ready to be signed. This is an interesting intake story I have. One of the things I do in my practice is people call me when they think they need a lawyer, and I help them find the right lawyer for the specialty they need. This was a mailman who had a commercial route, and on his route, he started buying buildings that were for sale, small little buildings. When he came to me, he didn't have a will, and he had real estate worth over $40 million. I took him to see 3 lawyers. One of them treated him like he was just the dumbest person in the world. The second one treated him like it was a business, and that's how he treated everybody. Got him in on time, asked all the questions, filled out his form, told him what he would do, and walked him out. And the third one treated him like he was her best friend. She went and got him coffee, asked about his kids, asked about his wife, asked how he got into buying the property, what he did to buy and sell, asked why the lawyer who helped him had never talked about a will, and it was a street front lawyer. And in talking to him, said, you may have a tax issue here, and brought in her tax partner, who ended up filing amended tax returns and got him over a $100,000 refund. And that firm ended up doing his estate planning, but does all his tax work, negotiates the buys and sells of every building he does now, and makes over $100,000 a year in fees on this person, all because the lawyer who met with him the first time was so personable, so respectful, and did it just the way you should do it when you meet any new client. I'm going to give you a couple examples here. Would you take this prospect? A Romanian immigrant on disability. He was terminated 7 years ago because he was convicted for gross sexual imposition. When he got terminated, he was cut off of disability, but he couldn't be deported because no country would take him. So his son called me and said, this isn't fair. My father's living in America and can't get disability. So I Googled his father and saw he had had 2 other gross sexual imposition convictions before, and he had a domestic violence conviction against his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. And I realized the son wanted him to get some money because he was living with him and his wife, who he'd had the domestic violence against, and his daughter, who he'd had it against. It took about 5 minutes of research to see you can't cut somebody off until they leave American soil. I took it. I got him back on disability, got my fee. The son calls me whenever he or anybody he knows needs a lawyer, and I refer them out. And 2 days ago, his son called me. His daughter got hit from behind, knocked into the middle of an intersection where she got hit from the side, went through the windshield, landed on something that pierced her heart. Her arm was severed in the accident. She spent almost 2 months in the hospital. She's going to be okay, but she had medical bills of close to $700,000 so far. I referred him to a lawyer who said there's a class action going on against the car manufacturer for defective airbag and seat belts. And the insurance, the person who hit her has $1 million of insurance. So he said it could be a $3 million case. So I'm going to get a nice co-counsel fee just for having treated this despicable man's son very nicely. So there's some nice things. Here's another case, $240,000 overpayment. He got a letter from the Office of General Counsel. I thought I could win it. Would you take a case like this? Or would you take this prospect? He stopped working. He was bipolar. He started drinking. Drinks a fifth of scotch a day. He was stopped at a red light. He was hit from behind, taken to the hospital by EMT, 2 fractured vertebrae, high blood alcohol. Or would you take this prospect? He suffers from depression. He's on medication, can't get along with co-employees, loses 2 fingers in a punch press. Or this one, 58-year-old man, 3 back surgeries, diabetes, hypertension, emphysema. Doctor says he should quit work, but he can't afford it. He's working at the same job he's been at for 26 years. He slips in grease at a restaurant. He was picking up lunch for his boss who sent him to get it. Think about it. Would you take that case, and what would you do with it? He might have a case against the restaurant for the greasy floor, might have a workers' comp case because the boss told him to go get lunch, and he might end up with Social Security because he might not go back to work now. So, you've got a client with 3 possibilities. Look at all of them. A lot of people say when I'm talking to a new prospect, they talk too much. How do you get them to stop? You tell them you're preparing for the hearing or you're preparing for the trial, and you have to give short answers. So let's start practicing now. Answer everything in as few words as possible, and at the end, I'm going to let you tell me everything we didn't cover. A lot of people repeat themselves. Say, you already told me that Dr. Smith is referring you to Dr. Jones. Let's limit it to telling me things you haven't told me. People with injuries and disabilities think nobody's listening to them. So if they know you've listened, they tend not to repeat themselves. Or the person that's with them wants to tell you things. Tell them we have to let her talk because it's her case, and at the trial, she's going to have to talk. So we have to let her do that now and get used to it. Some people want to ask you about another firm. It's usually firms that they've seen a lot of television advertising for. Never say anything negative about anything else. Use positives about your firm. When they say, what about such and such firm? It says they're the most successful firm in this area. And you say, we've been practicing as long as they have, and we get great results for all of our clients. We're right here for you all the time. Be positive about yourself without saying anything negative about anybody else. Reinforce how you can help that client now. Talk about what you will do for them Just turn it around to what you're going to do for the people you're talking to, and emphasize the urgency of their case. The sooner we begin representing you, the sooner we can start helping you. The sooner we get started, the more likely it is that you're going to get a favorable result. A little urgency does wonders. Asking that extra question is crucial. One more question can often make it a good case. I was in a Social Security firm where the intake person was going to reject a 41-year-old man with a bad back because she said, "What's the most weight you've lifted in the last 6 months?" And he told her 40 pounds. I said to the man, "What happened when you lifted 40 pounds? And he said he doubled over, fell to the floor, couldn't get up, and the EMT had to take him to the hospital where he was in traction for 3 days. Now, one more question took a bad case and made it a good case. Be persistent. Don't give up. If you hear one answer you don't like, it sometimes can lead to another question. Make sure you tell people what you're going to do after they've signed up with you. When we get your forms back, we will file an appeal. We'll write your doctor. We'll write your insurance company. We can't do anything for you until we get the forms back. So get them back to us as soon as possible. We don't want to delay your case, so it's important that you do this quickly. If someone's in your office, shake hands when they come in, shake hands when they leave. Make sure that you shake hands with anybody that comes with them. If they come with a spouse, a friend, a child, shake hands with everybody. Don't ignore everybody that's with your client. But it's also important when you shake hands to look at someone until you see the color of their eyes. You're not going to remember the color of their eyes. But people today tend not to look at those when they're shaking hands with them. So if you look at someone until you see the color of their eyes, that means you've looked at them long enough to notice who they are and pay attention to them. It makes your clients feel important, and that's important. Your intake people have to know that prospective clients are buying you. Remind your staff that they're always an extension of you. They have to respect everyone all of the time. If someone's not being proper, not treating them properly, they're an extension of you. They have to ask themselves how you would react to that caller and ask if you would take that person as a client. If someone's being very troublesome, you have to have someone in your office that call can be passed to. You decide how many new clients do you want each month. Do you have the right staff to get you there? You have to look at that. If your intake staff and your support staff managing cases isn't right to meet your goal of how many new clients you want, you have to dig down and deep and decide the changes you have to make. Do you have the right procedures to get you there? I've seen a lot of people who say, I want 50 new clients a month, but they have the procedures to get 20. You have to look at yourself. You have to make yourself make the changes to get where you want to be. Don't be resistant to change. Everything you do won't work. If everything you do works, you're not doing enough. Some things fail. Look at it. Look at the failures to make yourself better. And don't set your goals too low. If you set your goals too low, you're bound to reach them, but you're never going to get where you want to be. Remember, every case has to have a theory. If your cases don't have a theory, you're going to take some cases that you have to get out of later. Teach your staff to ask the extra question. Speed counts. If you're not getting those new clients signed up quickly, they're going elsewhere. Keep track of your intakes by person. Incentivize the people on your intake department. We can talk another time about incentivizing everybody, because I'm a big believer in that. And constantly educate your staff about what you will take, because that's also important. It's true that in our practice, we build no bridges, but we keep clients from sleeping under them. We raise no buildings, but we keep clients from sleeping in their doorways. We only paint pictures of the lives we change. There is little of all that we do that the human eye can see on a grand scale. But for people who are not in a peaceful state when they contact us, we smooth out difficulties, we relieve stress, we solve problems. We take up other people's burdens, and by our own efforts, we make possible a more peaceful life for the people who contact us. Always remember to do that for the people who call you needing an attorney. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. That was terrific. I think you've helped a lot of people today. Hey, I do have a couple of questions for you here. And the first one, this attorney says their employees are either too busy or consider their work too important for them to be the backup to the receptionist. How does this attorney get them to understand the importance of answering the phone this fast?
Well, everybody has to know that if they don't get clients, they're not going to be busy anymore. So part of their job is backing up the receptionist. I like to put in everybody's job description that the last line should be, and everything else necessary for the efficient operation of the office. You can do it either by rotating by hour in the office, or having everybody have a day a week or a day every other week, depending on the size of your office. But it's important that everybody appreciate what the receptionist does and pitch in to help. It makes the whole office better. When I was practicing, we were getting over 900 calls a day, and I had 3 receptionists, but I always had the rest of my support staff on a rotation of backing them up. So if all 3 of them were on the phone, the calls were forwarded on this system that was way beyond anything I could understand. But my office manager changed it daily that it would go to person 1, 2, 3, 4, backing up when they had to. And you just need to do it. Everybody has to buy into the fact that those people calling the office are important, and they all have to be all in to help them. That's their job.
All right, that sounds good. Here's another. Earlier in the presentation, you talked about empathy training. This attorney was wondering how or where do they go about finding such a thing?
That's a good question. It's usually taught by psychologists. And if you live in an area where there's a medical school, you can probably call there and ask. Otherwise, Google it. And if you Google empathy training, you can probably find people who teach it. I would interview them first to see what they do, how they do it, if they've ever done it in a business setting. There are very few people who have done it in a law office setting, and for sure in a contingency fee law office setting. But if they've done it in a business setting, explain your kind of practice. I think somebody who does empathy training would love being in a contingency fee law office and teach the support staff and the lawyers how to be more empathetic to their clients.
Okay. I think we have time for one more. One attorney wants to know, what's the role of the office manager? Do they work up cases, and should they answer the phone to help also?
Okay. If you don't have more than 30 people working for you, there's no need for an office manager. If you call somebody office manager in a small office, they tend to overestimate their own importance, and it causes problems. Smaller offices should have an office administrator, and the office administrator should be doing anything necessary for the office also. That can be anything from helping on the phones to helping manage cases to paying bills to ordering supplies. Most lawyers spend 40 to 60% of their time doing things they shouldn't be doing. If they look at themselves and say, what am I doing that I shouldn't do? And see how much of it they can delegate to their office administrator. The more things they give the office administrator, the less that person may have time to do of things like answering the phone. But if you have an office of, say, 4 employees, the office administrator might be more likely to have to answer the phones than if you have an office of 12 employees. Depends on size, depends on personalities, depends on how much you've given the office administrator to do. One office I know, the office administrator is in charge of payroll, scheduling, supplies, and federal court. That person wouldn't have time to answer phones. I've been to other offices where the office administrator ought to be answering phones because they don't do much else. So look at your office and see what needs to be done and see who has time to do it.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any additional questions, Jim or I would both be happy to talk with you offline at any point. As for now, thank you everyone for attending today's webcast. On behalf of Jim Brown plus the entire team at Firmidable, thank you for joining us today. Now go out there and get some great clients.